So, first podcast or the first episode or beta episode, so to say, of the Turn for Sparks controversy podcast, which tomorrow will mark 20 years. Tomorrow will mark 2 years of it. Dave, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about when I say it. But
Yes.
I'm not going to get into detail about that. For this quick test, hopefully it goes well and hopefully it catches the audio from your end and on my end for that matter. The 2023 F1 season. First off, your thoughts and comments overall on this past 2023 F1 season.
Depends who you talk to. Depends on the, depends on the which side of the garage you're on. Of course, you're on the Red Bull side. Of course, it's dominant on one garage, up and down on the other. And then if you are, with the others, Mercedes, they had a rocky start. Not as much as like McLaren.
Well, McLaren did have McLaren. Remember, did have a rocky start at the beginning, but they picked it up at the second half.
Bottom. They were towards the bottom. It was.
McLaren were well off at the first half.
They were well off. It was just unbelievable, and also same with Ferrari. They all had the, they just couldn't match Red Bull. And then you also, well, of course, an unexpected surprise that I don't think anyone expected, Aston Martin, especially Alonso.
I was about to say, you must be referring to Alonso's huge resurgence.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll just refer to Alonso because he did majority of the work. If you see,
which he did,
the ending results between him and his teammates. I don't really want to refer his name because he hasn't earned it. His dad can have his name, but I'll just say Lance.
Or as Josh Lavelle likes to dub him, Sir Lancelot.
That too, but also there was when I guess Lance was a little bit when he was I guess out, or I don't know. There was a little glitch in the F1 app, or their standings under. Actually, they didn't even say Aston Martin; it just said Alonso in the constructors. Yeah, it was funny. It just said Alonso, not Aston Martin.
That tells you something, that Alonso was the main guy that did the work. Lance,
well, you could see,
sure, Lance finished in the points, but the question is, did he get a podium? No, he did not.
No, in the first, I guess, quarter of the season, yeah, Alonso was there, either second or third. He was on a podium
on a daily
pretty consecutive
basis
until, for some reason, towards the second half, Aston Martin just kept dropping.
And dropping, and dropping, and dropping.
Yes.
Again, the upgrades that the teams keep putting into these cars, most specifically McLaren, because like we've said, they were well off the mark at the beginning of the first half. But then second half, Silverstone was when it started to pick up. Because you remember in Silverstone, both McLarens actually were up front. Both Piastri and Lando Norris was. Until Verstappen came in past them both and walked away with the win. Per usual, as it was this season. Which, speaking on Max Verstappen, Speaking on Max
Well,
Verstappen,
McLaren,
what do you
yeah,
say on Max winning a championship this season and last year for that matter?
this year, really there was no competition, even with his teammates, because it was like there's like the well, Sergio is going to his fourth year, right?
One,
He just ended
two,
his third year.
his is his third year with Red Bull.
Yeah, so he'll be going to his fourth. But
Yes.
we've seen the same pattern with Perez. He has a pretty strong first half of how the car is right out of the gate, but then even Max struggles. But then when they tune it to more Max, now it's the opposite for Perez, and now he starts to struggle.
I feel like, to me personally, I feel like Perez struggles in most of the races, though, minus Baku and Saudi, where he won. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that he's not up to par with Verstappen's level. That's what I'm getting at.
Well, I think he also gets into his head that early on that he thinks he has a chance. So pretty much like the mindset of Bottas with Hamilton. I don't know when he comes to the realization that he can't.
And that,
And then he starts to mess up. Well, Bottas didn't mess up, but he was still he was still with Hamilton, but he was still managed to be, second. And what was it? I think was that 2017 or 2018? He was the closest to Hamilton. Bottas was the closest. I think it was 2018. He was closest to Hamilton in winning the championship. That was his closest, but of course, like Perez,
I was thinking
he kept
2019,
making
even though
mistakes.
2019 Hamilton ran away from the competition, including his own teammate. Because you remember in 2018, Bottas went winless, though.
Okay, I'm getting my years wrong, but one of the years that Bottas was the closest to Hamilton that he could have had a chance for the title, but again, he started making mistakes.
Countless, but Turkey 2020 especially.
Uh, uh,
Even
he,
though, even though,
he doesn't want to talk about that. The ring arounds,
considering the countless times he spun off, definitely one
and
of those
then his
races that
teammate
he
just
wants to
goes
forget
right by him, and then Hamilton passed him.
and ran away with the championship. His
Mm-hmm.
seventh. Were you watching that race live? I bet you were.
You know it, of course, and that was just unbelievable. Well, I mean, not every driver is good in the rain, but for
So
Turkey
Lewis,
especially, they resurfaced that, and that just makes it like 10 times harder because you're driving like it feels like you're driving on ice.
ice. Because
So
combine the Pirelli
that just puts
tires,
another level of difficulty.
combine the Pirelli tires that were fit for that weekend, combined with the new asphalt surface, combine that with rain. Yeah, it's going to be one hell of a challenge to cope with. Yeah, it's one thing you do if you do it during dry conditions, but on the wet, good luck. And in a way, it was a blessing considering behind Hamilton, Vettel got on the podium. That's because when Vettel got on the podium, Leclerc, his teammate, you know where that turn where they were coming into? It's the same one where Weber and Vettel had to come into blows. That's where Leclerc went.
Yeah, it was the final sector was the yeah pretty much yeah it's the final sector after the the mini straight.
Yes. It's that
Yeah,
left,
because
right,
pretty much
left.
Leclerc tries to dive more on the inside of Perez, but then he pretty much just
Shot himself in the foot,
understeered.
slipped,
He
and
just
lost.
understeered, and then Perez, and then Vettel
Took it away from him and got those podium places, second and third respectively, which that was the last podium for Vettel in Ferrari colors. His only podium of 2020, which comes back to what I said. I think I mentioned this in one of the videos that I did on Sebastian Vettel's 2019 season. I don't know if you've seen that one or not. But again, this was 4 years ago. I don't know what delusion potion I was on at the time. But I remember saying at the end of the presentation that Vettel would be up there with Hamilton and Bottas, more so Hamilton for the 2020 championship. How so wrong I was. You know the SF1000 that ran in 2020?
Yes.
That thing didn't even lead a lap. Not a single lap led. That's how bad it was.
I mean, 2020, Ferrari doesn't even want to talk about because that was like one of the worst seasons in history.
Williams, same thing. They didn't even score a point that year. The first time ever in the team's history that they haven't scored a point. I mean, they were close. They were close to scoring a point, though, in Imola with George Russell. But do you remember in the safety car period? It was coming into that. It was coming to that tight left. No, not left. It was coming to that tight right chicane, or the fast. You know what I'm referring to. When you go downhill, and then you turn to the right, and you have to hit two apexes on corner entry, and then at the exit. That's where Russell went off, going downhill before he makes the right-hander. Again, this was under the safety car, mind you. Goes off, crashes. In 10th place. 1 point gone. And that was gutting to watch. Because, like I've said, Williams, no points scored in 2020. That could have been their only point scored in 2020. But George, again, threw it away. Which I don't know if people who are listening to this podcast or this beta podcast, so to say, or pilot. Because you know how people say pilot in their opening shows and whatnot. Did you know that the Williams car that they ran in 2020, it was supposed to be different if you remember preseason testing that year?
For 2020, right?
Yes.
I believe so.
You use the toothpaste Colgate, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly what that was. That was originally the paint scheme that Williams was supposed to run, aka the Colgate car. Because it
that was the meme.
Car.
So
because it was a meme. It was a meme for a good long while in 2020 before the season started. Do you remember when Hanoi was announced to be on the schedule in 2020?
Yes.
Imagine prepping for a Formula One Grand Prix for, when was it announced? 2018? For 2 years.
Yeah.
You just finished making the final touches to it, and then next thing you know, the world is on lockdown and it gets canceled. And it's not coming back anytime soon. All that money, all that time. In the end, all for
and F1 hasn't talked about it since.
This could be rumors or fake news, so to say, that Hanoi might come back. Don't quote me on that, though.
Well, we got to hear from F1 themselves because because they're the ones. Well, mostly it's the FIA because they have their standards of making sure the tracks are up to their standards.
Every single track, period, whether it's old or new. Which, speaking of Vegas, did you watch practice?
I was watching practice one, and then all of a sudden, it was red flag, and then they weren't going to resume because of the drain
Carlos
cover.
Sainz hit that manhole, which damaged the floor of his car.
Yeah, and then that's kind of. I think that's kind of stupid.
It's more
That
stupid that they gave him a
they
penalty.
fined him and penalized him, but they had no control over that. That's
exactly. That's what I'm saying. How can you penalize someone and give a grid penalty for someone that happened that's not in their control?
Right.
That's not the only time
now,
the FIA has. That's not the only time the
so now they
FIA
had to
has
replace the
made
floor. They
calls
had
like
to
that.
put a new battery in it. Like, come on.
New battery, new floorboard, all of that.
And I'm not sure if they were getting reimbursed because that taps into the cost. The cost that limits all the F1 teams.
Are you talking about the budget cap?
Yes. So when they introduced the
budget cap in 2021,
the budget cap, right? I think they started at 140 million. No, 145 million, and it was gonna go down. I think every 5 million, except for what was that? I think that was I think that was last season. It was they kind of raised it due to the cost of the freight and all the shipping costs. So they kind of raised the budget. Yeah. So they kind of raised it. I think they added another 1.5 million. So it was like 41 million.
Didn't Red Bull exceed that the budget cap limit in 2022? No, was it 2021 or 2022?
It was 2021. 2022 they were fine.
For that.
It was 2021. They exceeded because of the accounting issues. And they pretty much got a slap on the wrist, which to this day, their punishment wasn't really a punishment.
Which it wasn't. Because, like you said,
no,
it's a fine. And Red Bull damn well has a crap ton in their pocket. So a fine is nothing. It's nothing to them.
Well, that and also, so they reduced their wind tunnel. So even though they pretty much already had the least amount of time in there anyway, because they were already first, so they were already behind, and also reduced their CND work. So, but also that really didn't phase them because for wind tunnel and CND, the only time a team has to go into the wind tunnel is mostly for the research and development. But that's only if you're still working on the car and upgrades. Red Bull didn't really need that
because of how dominant they were.
Yeah, the only time they probably would have to use them is to upgrade the floor and the front wing, because those are the two main components
that keeps the car stable and aerodynamic advantage.
Yes. Pretty much the front wing is majority of it, but
yes,
the floor also.
The front wing specifically.
Yes, that's why they have all the fins and all that to keep the tires having the grip, have the proper downforce it needs and the proper airflow to go over it.
What about under the floor?
I mean, that's just, yeah, but that's just like low pressure. It's just like an airplane, but upside down.
They're basically driving airplanes in a sense, but not literal airplanes, but you get the hint what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
And it's been this way
Yes.
since the front wing and the rear wing has been implemented into the sport since the 1970s.
Well,
if not a bit earlier than that.
Well, thanks to Colin Chapman.
With his Lotus team. I forget
Yes,
what car model
because
it was. No, I forget the name of it.
Colin Chapman, he was pretty much
The Adrian Newey.
pretty much everything.
Before Adrian Newey.
No, he was everything. He was the team principal. He was the engineer. He was the aerodynamicist.
Technical director.
I mean, he was pretty much everything. He was pretty much the whole team, except for actually building the car. But he was the engineer, the aerodynamicist. If he didn't implement the front and rear wing, F1 wouldn't have it.
To
Maybe
this day.
probably later on, but no one really thought of that.
But Chapman.
And he was also Chapman was the first one to put the engine in the back.
He was?
Yes, because all the others, like Ferrari, they all had the engines in the front. Yes.
I think I remember seeing a quote. It was from a YouTube video I watched a while ago. I don't remember the YouTube video, but Enzo Ferrari, he mentioned a comment about that, with the engine being at the back instead of the front, where he said, and I quote, "The horse is supposed to pull the car, not push it."
Now, that may be true, but Enzo Ferrari, he's a legend, of course. His engines back in the day were strong.
And
they were
with certain seasons.
They were superior from an aerodynamicist. You got also right now you got to think about the ballast and the balance.
Yes.
If you have you have the heavy part in the back, now you can play around with the weight.
Yes. And that's what they did, especially back in the day, which Enzo Ferrari or Colin Chapman, who is the best one in that sense?
I would say Colin, because he revolutionized F1.
Which he did.
That's why that the Lotus that Emerson Fittipaldi drove, they did not change that car, I think, in like 3 years, because it was so dominant. But they had no reason to change it.
Red Bull could do the same thing, right? Considering how dominant they wept the floor with everybody this year. And last year.
I mean, that's pretty much they kind of did that for 2021 because
of COVID.
Really. Yeah, so
everybody ran the same car from 2020.
Yeah, so that was the only exception for Lotus. They didn't. The FIA didn't really do those rule changes like they do now. They didn't have the specs you needed to change every year,
like we do nowadays.
Yes,
because back then you were limited with what you've got to a degree.
Yes, that's where the aerodynamicists and the engineers got to be creative.
And that was during a time when Lotus were on top, in front of Ferrari.
Oh yeah,
McLaren. That was when McLaren was starting out too. By the way, for those that don't know, McLaren were on the first legs at the time because they started in 1966. Monaco was their first race. I believe the car. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but I believe the first car in that race was colored white, as in the color white. It was a white paint scheme, I think, if I'm not mistaken, instead of the orange like we know of today.
I believe it was white, and then eventually they
changed it to orange.
Turned it to orange. the papaya orange.
Yep, the papaya orange, which we know today. And then it was the Texaco, pretty sure it was a Texaco sponsor car.
Yeah, it was,
And then the
yes.
Marlboro sponsorship, and then the West
Well,
sponsorship,
that's
and
the
then the Johnny
Marlboro is the
Walker.
most legendary because of Senna and Prost.
Yes,
But
most
the
notably
Texaco
Senna.
one is also the Texaco is also legendary because of Hunt.
Yes, Marlboro as well, but mainly with Senna and Prost. Mainly Senna.
Of course.
But James Hunt,
Well, of
same
course,
thing. I can see where
Ricky
you're
Lauda
coming from with that
also
because of the
drove
movie Rush.
a Marlboro.
Because in 1976, that's what the 2013 film Rush was based off of, the 1976 Formula One World Championship, where they showcase James Hunt's McLaren M23 that he ran in that particular season, which is iconic for that main reason alone, because of the movie, which is now 10 years
Yes,
old. Did you see it in the theaters 10 years ago?
I did. And I was surprised that not many people were there.
You seen it 10 years ago in the theaters.
I had to because well I already knew the story, but I wanted to actually see it. I give props to Ron Howard because that's by far my favorite biopic besides Senna
I was
because
about
that's a
to say,
documentary.
what about Senna?
Well, I mean that's a documentary. This is a
Documentary.
biopic. Mm-hmm.
But as far as a recreation of a true event, it's Rush.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I agree with you 100%. That's actually, you want to know something? That's one of the first movies, or first, I guess you could say documentary, but it's mainly a movie based on a true event or events. That was actually the main F1 themed movie that got me into F1 4 years ago. I think I
Really?
watched it late August, mid August 2019. That's when I watched it for the first time. I remember watching it once or twice during that time span. And immediately, I just knew that I had a love and passion for the sport, which my love and passion for F1 started late July, early August of 2019. That's when it all started. Here I am today, 4 to almost
Well,
5 years later. Huge F1
also
hit.
in also in 2013, there was also a documentary of F1 called One. So
I've
it
heard of that one,
pretty much
but
told
unfortunately,
it told
I've
the
never
history.
gotten the chance to see for myself. No matter what streaming platform I search for, it's not there.
I think I've seen it on YouTube,
It's on YouTube?
but I haven't seen it. I haven't watched it in a while.
It's on YouTube?
But I forget where I actually watched it, but I believe it was YouTube. But it's really good.
And it's titled One.
One.
I remember seeing a poster of that. How long is it, by the way?
Uh, it's under 2 hours.
So I'd say an hour and 50, maybe? At least that's my best guess. There was
Hour 52.
Speaking of F1 movies or F1 documentaries, so to say, there was Schumacher that came out 2 years ago. I remember you told me when it came out 2 years ago that you weren't interested in watching it because you're not a fan of Schumacher, from what you told me.
That and also my brother, I think he watched it, but they didn't talk about his cheating. So
They
I
didn't?
think that's one part. Uh, not that he said, because I think
They
that's
covered up.
one major.
They
That's
covered up his
one.
Soviet incident from '97 and Adelaide in '94. They covered it up.
Oh, then my brother probably was. He was probably lying. Well, also, what about not many people talk about, but when they auctioned off his Benetton, they did say that his Benetton was equipped with electronic aids. And we talked about this, that it was banned.
Yes, which
So,
it was. And it's still a debate to this day if whether or not the Benetton car from 94 used the electronic aids.
and of course, in the Senna documentary, Senna can hear the traction control. And that's why he wanted Williams to protest,
Wait a minute.
but they didn't.
Wasn't that at the Pacific Grand Prix? Or was it
Yes, when he crashed out.
on the opening lap?
Well, he got yes, when he got crashed out, but he can hear the traction control.
And yet,
That's how good Senna was. He can hear it. And he wanted to protest, but Williams didn't.
and I would guess they never did they?
Nope. And of course, in the documentary, even Frank Williams himself, they didn't.
Because they thought that the Benetton team was still that they were on the level playing field like everybody else.
Yes. Well, we all know they weren't.
And yet the FIA didn't do anything, considering Schumacher still won the championship, by the way, under controversial circumstances, so to say.
I think they kind of investigated the Benetton. They saw that there's a video that does say that they did say they saw a laptop in the garage that can be hooked up
From the Benetton garage,
to
yes.
Yes. But they didn't have reason to believe it was active. I think that's another strike for FIA for not investigating further.
In other words, that's another crack beginning to form on the FIA's part.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
hasn't the dam already broken from the FIA, considering how many asinine calls were made?
I mean, over the years, the FIA has always been pretty inconsistent. I mean, they tried to be, but not really.
And with questionable calls, too.
Yes.
With calls that make you question, especially that one race that we all remember that it's almost 2 years of that race. You know what race I'm referring to.
Yep, Abu Dhabi.
Can you believe it's been 2 years since that race?
So when Latifi crashed out right under the hotel,
Coming out of the hotel.
so they had the safety car. Yeah, well, it's right there. You know, they had like almost like
less than 5 to go, from what I can remember.
Yeah, 5 to, but they didn't even move Latifi's car. It was still there. I still don't know why Michael Massey. I do know that people would be like two sides would be, angry if they were to end it on the safety car. People would say it's not a fair race. Max went in, he got fresh tires.
That's what got me annoyed at first. That's what got me concerned when I saw Max came in for a fresh new set of soft compounds. And Mercedes and Hamilton had a chat, and it led to Hamilton staying out on those hard compounds, which were what, over 30 laps old at that point?
Something like that, and they were pretty much already done. He had the not that much
cushion before the Latifi crash.
Yes. And then I don't know why they were going back and forth, especially so when Max was in between the lap cars, at first they said they weren't going
to allow
to
the
let
lap
the
cars by.
cars. Yeah, because they wouldn't have time, which that makes
Exactly.
sense.
When this,
That
mind
would have
you,
been fine.
this was happening when Latifi's car was still on the track. Yes.
It was still there. It still hasn't moved. It's still unbelievable. Then, once Max gets on the radio, said that, this is not fair. Then all of a sudden, now they let the lap cars go.
I think the
But as soon as
FIA
they,
heard what Max said at that point as to why they did that.
yes, but then, so if they do that, again, the rules say that when lap cars, overtake the safety car, they have to go all the way back to the back
Yes, at the
before
start of
the
the next
safety
lap.
car before the safety car gets called in. Then they have that start. They weren't going to have time.
Exactly.
But once the lap, or they only selected the lap cars that were in between Hamilton and
Max.
Verstappen.
That was it.
But that still wasn't really fair, because what about the lap cars that were
behind them?
That still doesn't make sense. That's still just.
When I saw, I was watching
it
live too. I woke up at the opportune time. I woke up right when the TV crashed. I sat there. I said to myself,
the only race.
It was under 5 to go. I said to myself, I think that's it. We're under 5 laps to go.
That was the only.
Hamilton's won it.
That was the only race. So that was the only race I didn't watch live. I didn't know anything till I
watched the highlight.
Watched it. No, I watched the full race.
Oh, you did?
No, I didn't go on social media or anything. I didn't want to know anything. I watched it. Then I got into our group chat, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, what the hell was that?
When regarding the finish.
Yes.
I wanted to snap myself, but decided not to.
This was well past, because I was the last one to know, because I didn't want to know what happened
live.
If I knew the result, I wanted to know what the hell happened. And it still doesn't make sense. And then they deemed it human error because it was Michael Massey. So that means...
You mentioned it in the comments, too. In one of the posts.
He made the wrong call.
Which you mentioned in the comments. You said, and I quote, human error champion.
Yes, because...
And you still stand by it.
They should... Yes. They should have reverted back to the last lap, because they messed up the restart procedure. That's pretty much the main cause. They
manipulated the rules too.
Yes,
because like you said, only the lap cars between Lewis and Max were able to go by, but the lap cars behind Max were not allowed to go by. So that right there speaks volume. And that's how Michael Massey, that's how you know Michael Massey wanted this to come down to a 1-lap shootout because of the call that he made with that.
Well, also the last few races, there was a few incidents that Michael Massey didn't punish Max that he should have, because he didn't want to mess up the championship. But you are the FIA. It doesn't matter. Rules are rules.
Exactly. And you have to obey them, even when you're
it doesn't matter.
In race control.
It doesn't matter if
Saudi, you say
don't want
you say
to
the tournaments before Abu Dhabi. I'm thinking of Saudi. Do you remember when Max...
Well, Saudi, that's one of them, because...
slowed down and the two championship protagonists...
He pretty much break that because Max didn't know... Well, I don't... So, why did Michael Massey... Well, he told Red Bull first before Mercedes, because Hamilton didn't know that Max was going to let him go. Hamilton thought it was going to be like another virtual safety car or a safety car.
Hence why he
Because
slowed
he slowed
down a
down.
bit behind Max when Max was slowing down immensely. And you know that Max was doing it strategically when his race engineer got on the radio and said, let Lewis by, but do it strategically.
Well, of course, that means, they had the DRS
The
right at the
DRS.
bend.
At the
So if
last corner,
you,
he can get that DRS advantage after he lets
yes,
Lewis by. That's why he slowed down at that particular portion of the course.
well, that's what we saw between Max and Leclerc. They would keep doing that.
The following year.
Yes, because they knew that that's the only way you can let someone by right at that corner. You can get them back at the end of the other straight.
And unfortunately, in 2021, that didn't go according to plan. But we did get the last laugh when we walked away with the dub.
Yes.
Which was a
But
blessing
also, with that,
in itself.
Also, it seemed like Max was under pressure. Well, it was a couple incidents with him, like under pressure. Saudi, of course,
Monza,
pretty much,
that's another one.
And Brazil.
Yes, when
Brazil is the biggest
they
one.
both went off.
That.
But when they both went off, when they both went on off the road, didn't Max gain an advantage rejoining the track?
No, I think Max was still ahead of the corner. That's why they didn't tell him to get that position. No, that's why Hamilton passed him, I think, on the next lap or next couple laps, and then he walked away.
And walked away with the dub.
Yes, because that engine was pretty powerful. If you remember the sprint
on the straights. So I feel like Red Bull, though, had the advantage in the corners, though. Looking back at the 2021 season with the cars that were produced at that time. Do you remember what I said about the whole safety car ordeal about Abu Dhabi 2021 when I said that I woke up in time to see Nicholas Latifi crashed out? I think it was 2 laps to go. 2 laps ago that it happened. But before then, just waking up, just getting myself up, and then I saw at the top of the screen lap cars were going to get past Lewis Hamilton in the safety car. It's the same lap cars that are in between Lewis and Max. At that point, I was really concerned. And then, before you know it, the safety car was going to end. And that's because, again, I woke up and I also saw Max Verstappen pit for fresh new soft compound while Hamilton was still out on the hard, which were, again, over 30 laps old. When I saw that, that's when I knew. That's when I knew we were screwed. Do you know that that corner that was reprofiled? It's not that chicane anymore before you enter the hotel. Section.
Oh yeah,
before you enter the hotel,
because
that particular course is reprofiled.
Yeah, because
Hamilton went to the outside. I feel like if he went to the inside line, maybe got the position back. Maybe. Again, had he went to the inside line.
Even if he did, I don't think he would have had enough grip or the momentum for the straight.
Not unless if he forces Max off the road.
Again, he still has to put in a way that, he doesn't get penalized.
Oh, that is true. Well, if Lewis was ahead in the corner, ahead of Max, it's his corner. Like Max in Brazil, they both went off. Max had no penalty. If the same thing happened in Saudi. If the same thing happened in Abu Dhabi, Hamilton probably no penalty. Again, if he was ahead in the corner, heading into the corner. I still won't forget that day.
Neither would Mercedes.
And neither would Toto.
And Hamilton.
That race was the level of the 1990 Japanese Grand Prix ended, or started, I should say. I say ended because of, well, Senna and Prost crashing out, ending their race. That sort of controversy.
Mm-hmm.
But ever since then, ever since Abu Dhabi 2021, it's been a struggle, I feel like, for Lewis to get back on top. Do you feel like it's still in his mind as he's behind the wheel?
I don't think so. I think just since well, I don't think Mercedes got a good grasp when F1 introduced the ground effect
Last year.
because that's where they really struggled. And also, Hamilton has complained about the seating position because I think they're more forward. Their seating position is more forward, so it's not ideal for him.
So you're saying it's not comfortable for him?
Not really, and that, and also he's like this was the second year because as you know, the previous year that was even worse.
With the porpoising,
Like
especially.
Yeah. Well, that and also he told the team his concerns, but he said they didn't really change that much.
They did it?
Especially the seating position. That was the main thing.
No wonder he struggled so much. Even though he would get 9 podiums last year, speaking, this year he got 6 podiums. Now,
I think
now, hear me out with this one. With last year's car, do you know the YouTuber named Audas?
Yes.
He compared and contrasted the Mercedes W13 to the McLaren MP424, as that car was also a handful for Hamilton to drive in 09. Even so, with those cars, on paper, again, you can argue it was a good season. You can argue it was a bad season. He still managed to get podiums here and there and managed to do what he can with the car. But let me ask you this. Was both 09 and last year's car, or last season, bad for Hamilton, for Lewis Hamilton standards? Because you expect him to be up in the top 3, at least. But like I've said, you think it was the MP424 or the Mercedes W13 that was more worse for Hamilton to drive?
I'm pretty sure it was last year because for 09, that was his. I wouldn't say that's his worst. I mean, there's nothing much he can do compared to Braun because that was really dominant. So there's not much he can do. He can do all he can.
And did finish 5th in the championship in 09. 1 point ahead of Kimi Räikkönen, who finished 6th behind Hamilton in 2009. McLaren, though, that year fell off the mark in the first half. They would pick it up in the second half. From Hungary to Abu Dhabi, they would pick it up in the second half, even though they still had its problems. It was still solid, to say the least. But Heikki Kovalainen didn't fare much better, though. But he did score points for the team here and there. Now, this year, though, did you know that F1 has lost over 600,000 fans this year?
I did not. Probably, is it because the sprint races or by the amount of dominance Red Bull has?
It's mainly due to the amount of dominance Red Bull has, mainly Max Verstappen winning.
That's what I thought because I've told Alex this that
Alex Smith?
they came to a point that yes, that they came to a point that I wasn't even sure if I was going to continue watching because I didn't see a point
Because you
of
know
watching the rest
what
of the
the
season.
outcome would be.
Yes, and you know me, I'm a diehard F1, but I've been watching F1 since
Late
well,
2009.
pretty much late '9, but pretty much 2010.
Full time in 2010.
And I've seen I've never missed a race, but
Not
saying
one
that
time you missed a race.
I'm not, and to say that I'm thinking of not watching the rest of the season,
Speaks volume.
that's something. Mm-hmm.
Because that's how you know. Because again, Max Verstappen, I'm going to bring this up. This year, 10 victories in a row. Was it during that time period, though? Or was it shortly after that when Max won 10 in a row?
I think it was probably after that.
After Monza.
Yes,
After Monza was Singapore, which, did you watch that live?
I did, and I'm glad I did.
Because Red Bull for once didn't win, let alone
Yes,
failed to make the podium.
yes.
You love it for Carlos Sainz and Hamilton and Norris, but you hate it for Russell, considering that costly mistake he made on the last lap.
I mean, that was just unbelievable that he just crashed out. He was in a good position, and then all of a sudden he went into the wall.
And crashed. And out of the
Yeah,
race. Out of the points.
he could just hold the position instead of just chasing, but you know, understand he's a racer. He wants to get as much points as he want to for the team, but that's costly mistake. Not getting points and also damage to the car.
Just goes to show, with these F1, especially nowadays, with these F1 cars, one mistake, next thing you know, you're in the barrier.
Mm-hmm.
If
Well,
you were in
especially
George's shoes, though, would you have held position and not race Lando, or would you wait until the DRS zone to overtake him, or that
I would
last
ask
dash
my
straight
engine.
before that right, left, and then the left to finish the lap?
I mean, I would ask my engineer. What's their pace? Are they dropping, or does it look like they're conserving? Then I can decide. Okay, probably if I know I have some grip, I can probably do an attack. But depending on the life of the tires, I could probably only attack once because after that, probably won't have that much left to attack.
And
And if
not
I
that much
can't
time.
succeed, then I would just mostly just hold the position.
And not risk it.
Right. But, adrenaline is high, especially in Singapore. I think that is the one of the most
Toughest races on the
demanding
calendar
track.
period. It's super
Yeah,
hot
because it's
at that
hot.
place.
It's super
And you're
hot.
racing there for
I mean,
almost 2 hours.
well, I mean, that's pretty much the only race that does exceed the 2 hour mark. Surprisingly, I think they only had, like a couple, I think, safety cars, if I'm mistaken. Or
They
did they
did have
not?
one when actually They had a virtual safety car when Esteban Ocon had an engine problem, and they had a full safety car when Logan Sargent crashed.
Okay, well, same thing. They had two safety cars, virtual or safety. But that's usually it's still surprising compared to others of Singapore, because usually at most, probably on average, probably around 5 safety cars.
What race comes to mind from that particular track that had that many safety cars? God damn.
Can't pinpoint one, but I know that I think it was the first race in Singapore that
2008.
they race in the rain.
The first race in Singapore? The first race in the rain at the track.
The first race the first race
the first
in the
rain Singapore race.
Yes.
Is what you're trying to say. So 2017.
Yes. So when Sebastian, Kimi, and
Max Verstappen as well.
Max. Yes. And that first lap incident, but also with Alonso. But that was a big crash. And well, of course, that took out both Ferraris. Surprisingly, Vettel carried on until he spun because he got hit anyway.
So there's no point in continuing, considering how much damage was done at the impact. Luckily, Lewis got away scot-free from that and won.
Well, luckily, Max. Well, he wasn't talked about as he was now.
Because Max back then in 2017 was still young and was still relatively new to the sport. It was his 15, 16, third year in the driving seat. And at that time, Max had, before Malaysia that year, Max had just one win. Just one. Spain 2016. He got lucky with that one because, Dave, I'm sure you know what happened at the start of that damn race.
Yeah, we all know. And again, Mercedes doesn't want to talk about it. And they don't want, of course, Mercedes doesn't want to point fingers who's to blame, but we know who was to blame.
Well, let me ask you this. Who was to blame in that sense?
Clearly, it was Rosberg.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. He even mentioned it
because
in his interview.
You can see, they showed Rosberg's onboard, right?
Yes.
He didn't know after the formation lap. He didn't know he was in the wrong mode.
He was in the wrong mode. It was an incorrect
engine setting. He was still in the harvesting mode. So he didn't know why Hamilton was he was gaining up so quick. But till he switched it, he saw Hamilton go on the inside. He tried to squeeze him
through the grass.
But I don't think Rosberg thought he was actually going to go onto the grass. I thought he was going to let off so he can hold position. But of course, karma came to bite him.
Right back in the
and Hamilton came right. Yep. But of course, Hamilton was also pissed.
Would you?
But he didn't.
I definitely would.
Yeah. Well, Hamilton was. I think he was shocked of what just happened because when he was skating into Rosberg, he took his hands off the steering wheel like you should, but he was also covering his visor, he didn't know what the hell just happened. And then once he came to realization, he threw the steering wheel because he was just pissed. And of course, the FIA, I think they deemed it as a racing incident.
Would you agree on that?
Absolutely not.
I'm with you on that.
The first lap, but there has to be a moment when you have to deem something a racing incident and to penalize a driver for dangerous driving. That was dangerous driving because he intentionally squeezed him out and put him onto the grass. And then it came back to bite him.
Right back in the ass. Not only took Hamilton, but it also in the end took out himself.
Well, we talked about this before. Also, what happened in Austria. When
I remember Alex Smith told me that moment in particular gave Rosberg a lot of hate.
What's that?
Did that particular moment, Austria 2016, regarding the last lap, did that one moment gave Rosberg a lot of hate?
Yes. I've said this before, but I didn't believe that Rosberg really earned that 26th title. I think he got lucky. Yeah, because of Hamilton's misfortune and
Malaysia in particular.
Unreliability. Well, that really sealed it.
For Rosberg?
Because that was Hamilton's last chance
to close the gap.
Yes. And that's why at Abu Dhabi, he tried to back up Rosberg into Vettel and Max.
And trying to force Rosberg into an error. Points. In other words, try to force Rosberg into an error.
Yes. Or at least.
Which, that tactic didn't work. Even though Hamilton won, he still lost it by 5 points. And you say
yes
that Hamilton is more deserving of the 2016 championship, yes?
I mean, if he, like, there was the couple incidents that Rosberg did, like Austria, he got penalized because, his car was damaged, so he lost the podium.
And a potential race win.
Yes. But he should have got penalized for Spain.
For Spain.
Especially because that's for the FIA's discretion, but that should have also put some points on his super license because that was dangerous.
Because you have the grass right there, and 9 times out of 10, you will lose traction on the back end, and they'll snap away from you, and you will lose control, which is exactly what happened on Hamilton's part.
Yep.
Not only took out Hamilton, but Hamilton made contact with Rosberg's car and ends up taking Rosberg himself out. So they both walked out with no points scored. So that comes back to what I said earlier, that Max got lucky in that race. And of course, we fast forward several years later, he's won multiple championships, which you can argue he's got 2.
Yeah.
And I can see why that is. But regarding this year, though, you notice Red Bull had won 21 races and Ferrari with 1.
Mm-hmm.
You know I'm getting with this, right?
Yes.
If you go back 35 years ago, the same thing happened. Ferrari won 1 race. McLaren won the rest with 15. It was basically history repeating itself. What was McLaren using as their engine supplier?
Honda.
What were Red Bull using this year as their engine supplier?
It's still like the Honda Racing, but technically it's under the Red Bull powertrain, because that's what I want to call it.
Isn't it owned by Honda though?
I mean, they took over the Honda, but it's not really it's not technically called Honda because they have now their own factory, but they're still using pretty much they are still Honda. They're just not calling it Honda.
So it's basically still a Honda. Oh, wait. Because I say that because you know where the engine is. You see the Honda logo where the engine is on the engine cover. That's why I say what I say. Now, with this podcast we got going on with the off season and when preseason testing pops around, which is sometime in February, now would be an opportune time because I've seen a prediction video on the OGs of WTF1, Matthew Gallagher and Tommy, I think that's his name, but Matthew Gallagher in particular. They did a predictions video at the beginning of the year and gave their thoughts on it and who was right and who was wrong at the end of the year. That's one thing I'm considering doing with you, Alex.
I mean, plenty of go on. Other YouTubers have done that
already.
Yeah, they have done. You know, Aldas is one of them. Josh Rebel, Tomo, like they all pretty much do their predictions.
Some of them early?
No, they usually do. I know, like I think Josh Rebel, he usually does his. He kind of bases on on testing, even though testing isn't really relevant because it doesn't really factor in of how the cars actually perform till the first race or qualifying.
Because it's still testing out the new components and whatnot.
Right, because testing doesn't really tell you everything. Like at testing, if you remembered, it looked like McLaren were pretty good. But of course,
we saw that. What year, though?
That was earlier this year.
And not last year, 2 years ago. 2 years ago also, they were quick in testing.
Yeah, but again, see, they probably, I'm not sure.
Even 2013, even 2013, Checo topped the charts when he was in McLaren colors in 2013 in testing.
Right.
And to an extent, 2012 also. You know why I say 2012 because McLaren had a consistent year that year, but it's mainly the reliability problems that they had back then.
Yes.
That's why I say 2012 also, to an extent. Again, even though they were consistent, reliability problems got in the way. Even though McLaren had the fastest car of the bunch that year. Even with that, you can still have reliability problems. And it's not the first time it's happened. You remember 2005?
Kind of.
McLaren, again, the fastest car of the bunch, but again, reliability problems, which costed Kimi Räikkönen the championship. I did a video on. Did I send you the video on Kimi Räikkönen's 2005 season, or did I not?
I believe you did.
Along with my other latest work, Damon Hill, Villeneuve, both of which from '96, and Michael Schumacher's championship runs with Ferrari. You've seen those as well?
Yes.
Once again, I was thinking we can do predictions at the beginning of the year and give our thoughts on our predictions at the end of the year and see who is right and who is wrong. Yeah, I'm jumping on I'm jumping on that boat. Now, Dave, you remember I told you about if you had a chance to purchase a car, a Formula One car at that, you said whatever it takes, the McLaren MP44.
Absolutely.
I bet you still stand by that.
Yes.
For the listeners out there, can you elaborate?
One, of course, my idol, or pretty much almost every driver's idol, Senna's first title winning car. And
in
of
the first season
course,
in McLaren colors.
and also that was naturally aspirated Honda engine that was very superior, standard age pattern. Surprisingly, not very little aerodynamic grip, but it was still powerful. Believe it or not, to me, I still believe that it's still the most dominant car. In '88, it won 15 out of 16 races.
You're saying it's the most dominant F1 car, period.
Yes.
What about the Red Bull RB19 from this year?
Well, they had more races. That's why '88 didn't have that much, and also, there was no sprint races, so you can't really factor that in.
Matter of fact, 1988, I'm pretty sure some of the races, or if not most of the races, Senna and Prost both would lap the whole field.
Yeah.
So I can see where you're coming from with that. Because Max, yeah, he would create a gap, but he wouldn't lap the whole field, though. Checo, when he won those two races in Baku and Saudi, same thing. He didn't lap the field.
Well, of course, only one track that I guess one side of the McLaren garage was dominant. Of course, that's Senna, but due to Senna's error, he
Monaco.
was so far ahead, but of course he made a costly mistake.
Monaco, when he at the Portier, hit the inside barrier,
Because
went off, hit the outside barrier, and that was it. Maybe he hit the inside barrier before he went to the outside barrier and crashed. Because they mentioned if you look at the tire marks, that's what give you clues and hints as to what happened. Because obviously, we don't have onboard footage from Senna's perspective, and we don't have a replay of what happened as to what of him crashing into the barrier.
no, they only have us some footage, but after the hairpin going into Portier, that's where it cuts off. So you just come to your own conclusion of what happened.
Even so, Senna went on to win 8 races in total in '88, his best season by far. I forget his average finish, but his average start, I know for a fact, it's etched in my mind. 1.2.
The one thing that really stands out, especially in Monaco, is the qualifying between Senna and Prost.
When Senna put the fastest lap time, beating Prost by 1.4 seconds at Monaco of all
Nearly
places.
1.5 seconds in the same car as Prost.
At Monaco of all places.
Yes.
I don't think that hasn't been done before or since.
No, because
Monaco speaking, at least. For
to
Monaco
this day,
speaking, I don't think that hasn't been done before or since.
Well, to this day, Senna is still the king of Monaco.
With 6 victories. Well, it could have been 7 had he not messed up in '88.
Well, no, he could have had 8 if the race wasn't stopped.
I know what you're going to. 1984.
Because he was catching up to Prost.
Which was
surprisingly uncompetitive Tolman.
A box that was. Excuse my swearing, but the Tolman that year in '84 was unreliable, to say the least.
Yes, and also had the double rear wing.
They did. Most of the teams had that, from what I can remember. And when I said the Tolman that year was unreliable, Dave, did you know in Imola, in Senna's rookie year, he failed to qualify?
I did.
And then the following round, I think it was the French Grand Prix, the turbo blew up on him. And then we come to Monaco, where it's that one that it's mainly infamous in Senna's rookie season. And frankly, the only highlight of Senna's rookie year, where he got,
Well,
realistically speaking, second place. Because again,
yes.
the race was stopped when Prost came to a standstill when the red flag was displayed.
But also, one future champion and one champion both crashed out. So Mansell crashed out and Lauda.
They did, because Mansell crashed out going uphill.
Yeah, he was going up to Beau Rivage. He was going up. He flicked it too hard and just went rear end to the barrier and just broke his rear axle.
And what happened to Lauda again?
I believe I know it happened. He stopped right at the
Mirabeau?
No,
Was it Casino Square?
right at the hairpin. I believe it was at the hairpin.
Close to Mirabeau, like next to Mirabeau, at the runoff.
Yeah, I believe. I think he had some kind of failure. I can't really remember.
I can't remember.
I know
it's been a long time since I last seen footage of the highlights of the '84 Monaco Grand Prix, let alone the result itself.
But of course, the rain can give advantage and disadvantage to drivers.
It depends, though, on their racecraft and the car that they're driving, though.
Yes.
Wait.
But, of course, we know that Senna, he doesn't like to think about it, but he's a rain master.
As I just said. Donington.
Okay.
Donington, 30 years ago at the time of this recording. 30 years ago, Donington. That right there comes to my mind. I can't stress.
I mean, that was an incredible first lap because he was going against
as you just said,
the dominant Williams.
First lap, he started 6th on the grid. Well, 5th because he dropped back a place at the start before the first corner. But 6th to 1st on the opening lap in the wet. That hasn't been done since then. And Senna went on to win it. While setting a lap record in Donington.
Oh, yeah.
But that was because he sped through the pit lane. Back in those days, there was no such thing as a speed limit on pit road.
Well, he only
sped for F1 at least.
The only time he sped through the pit lane because his team wasn't ready, so he went right back out.
That's why.
He saw they weren't ready, he just went right back out. Like, I'll try again next lap.
Did he come in next lap?
I believe he did, to make sure they were ready this time.
And they were, I would presume.
Yeah, but that was why he sped through the pit lane, because they weren't ready.
And set the lap record.
Yeah.
And went on to win.
Yes.
He won 5 times in 93. Brazil, Donington, Monaco, Adelaide, Japan, Suzuka.
Oh, Japan.
That was the same one where he got pissed at Eddie Irvine and actually punched Irvine, actually. All because Irvine got his lap back. Much to Senna getting furious by that, which I kind of still don't understand why. But in the end, finished second in the championship. I think the margin between him and Prost, 26 points was the margin between second place Senna and Prost in the championship standings. Then went over to Williams the following year, ran 3 races, his home race in Brazil, the Pacific Grand Prix, and as I'm sure we all know, Imola. Many would argue that Imola, that they should have canceled the Grand Prix altogether because of what happened to Roland Ratzenberger in practice.
Well, before that, it was what happened to
Rubens Barrichello.
Rubinho.
when he had a crash at the final section of corners. He went off.
Mm-hmm.
His car went airborne after hitting the curbing, hit the tires, and had a massive crash. And at the end had a broken nose. Michael Schumacher won it. Mika Hakkinen second place or third place on the podium. But I know Hakkinen was on the podium, and Schumacher since Schumacher won. I think
Yeah.
Gerhard Berger was also on the podium. I could be wrong when I say that though, because it's been a long time since I've seen the footage of the highlights of that particular race. But man, what wonders could have been had Senna not crashed out in that race. What wonders what could have been. And who knows what he could have achieved in Williams equipment. Because you remember, Damon Hill was in championship contention in 94, but lost out by 1 point under controversial circumstances, which didn't you tell me over a year ago that Damon Hill should have won the championship in 94? And frankly, in your eyes, is the 94 champion?
Yes.
I can understand why. I can understand why, considering what tactics Schumacher did in that moment when the two came to blows in Adelaide that year.
Well, and this is why for 2021 Abu Dhabi, before heading to that race, if anything were to happen, I think they kind of called it like the Schumacher rule, that anything happens, that I think the driver will get disqualified.
And it's funny you say that because you fast forward 3 years later in Jerez, Schumacher tried the same tactic on Villeneuve, didn't work. Coma bit him in the ass, ends up in the gravel, out of the race, and out of the championship because it got docked of his points and got disqualified for his actions. It was Hakkinen that won, David Coulthard second, making it a McLaren 1-2 finish, Jacques Villeneuve third, and with it, the championship, which he drove for Williams at the time, which Williams today have Logan Sargent and Alexander Albon, bless you. When Jacques Villeneuve won the championship in 97, that remains, as of today, the last time Williams won a championship in both the drivers' and constructors' table. Yeah, it's been that long. And the last time they won a race, would you believe it, Fausto Maldonado, the Spanish Grand Prix in 2012. Did you watch that race live?
I did.
Were you
and it was surprising.
Were you shocked as hell when Fausto won?
I was. And still defending Alonso.
What?
He was defending Alonso. Like, Alonso was trying to beat him, but he couldn't.
Because Maldonado held him off in those final laps.
Yes.
And won. Which proved to be a fluke because that was his only win, only pole, and only podium in his whole career.
And to this date, Williams' last win.
Yes. Would you believe it? And before then, you rewind the clock to 2004 in Brazil, it was Juan Pablo Montoya with the win. Again, before Spain, 2012. Before Spain 2012, it was Juan Montoya, who arguably was the star driver in Williams at that time, before he made the switch to McLaren in 05. And then after the first 10 races in 06, left to join NASCAR, which he kind of fared well. It depends on what year and what race you look at. But F1, in his F1 career, same thing. F1 career, same thing. Do you remember we touched on the 1984 Monaco Grand Prix and how wacky that race was?
Yes.
That race looked no further than 1996. that race was a whole nother can of worms of wacky and eventful. Because 1984, how many cars finished that race in Monaco?
In 1984?
If you go to Racing Reference, they have that answer for you.
Let's see. Yeah, it was only 8 finishers.
96, 3
Oh
finishers.
that was 84.
84 had 8 finishers.
Yes.
1996, only 3 finishers.
Oh well, yes, because wow, that was just unbelievable, and I think that was the first and only race. Penis.
Olivier Panis, his only win.
Yes.
And Ligier's last win.
Mm-hmm.
David Coulthard was on the podium for McLaren, finishes second, and Johnny Herbert for Sauber finished third. Even though I don't think he finished the race, but he's still classified as third. While everyone else, 20 plus in the field, either had a mechanical problem or crashed. What should have been Damon Hill's race to win, because he was leading and led the most laps at that, for that matter, but he was leading until his Renault engine blew up. Going through the tunnel section, that's where his engine let go.
Right.
But he would come back later on, several months later. He won the championship either way. And that was the last competitive machinery Damon Hill had in his Formula One career. Because then he went to Arrows the following year in 97, which he was close to winning the Hungarian Grand Prix, but again, mechanical fault. Again, they got an engine problem. It had to have been an engine problem, wasn't it? Because I know for a fact it was a mechanical problem.
I know it was some kind of mechanical problem.
It had to have been. I know that for a fact. And Villeneuve picked up the scraps and won that one. 98 and 99, last 2 years in Formula One, race for Jordan. Did you know in 1999, Damon Hill considered retirement right after the British Grand Prix?
I believe so.
But Eddie Jordan forced him to keep him on and begged him to keep him on. He did and suffered. I say suffered because the Jordan car that year, well, for Damon at least, wasn't up to par. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, though, his teammate, that's a different scenario because Frentzen, would you believe it, had a shot at the damn championship with the likes of Hakkinen and the Ferrari of not Michael Schumacher, Eddie Irvine, because Schumacher got hurt in Silverstone.
Right.
Now, here's the thing. This is another controversial hot take. If Schumacher didn't crash out, would you believe he would have won the 1999 World Championship again had Schumacher not crashed and got hurt in Silverstone?
Maybe, maybe not. It really depends how this rest of the season would have played out.
I remember some people saying that, with regarding 99 at least, Hakkinen won the championship by luck. You agree or disagree in that regard? For me, personally, I disagree.
Actually, Hakkinen did say it was luck.
He did?
He did. When I think it was McLaren's 50th anniversary, when they had a video with Hakkinen and Coulthard. You know, they first drove Fittipaldi's McLaren and Senna's McLaren. And then they drove Hamilton's McLaren and Hakkinen's McLaren. And he did say he got lucky.
In 1999.
Yes.
So, in other words, you're saying you agree with that saying?
I mean, I could say what I think, but Hackman said he got lucky.
And the margin of victory in the championship was 2 points between him and Eddie Irvine. The
Yeah.
closest Irvine had ever come, and the only time he's ever got that close to a championship. And in the end, didn't work out for Irvine. I think what really hindered his chances was at the Nürburgring. Because you remember that the Ferrari faltered with the pit stop when Eddie Irvine came in for a stop at that race?
I believe so.
Think of, because you remember Daniel Ricciardo's race from Monaco 2016, right?
Oh my God.
It was basically that.
Yeah.
But only difference is there was a championship on the line for Irvine's
Right.
part. But regarding Ricciardo in 2016 in Monaco, even though I'm a Hamilton fan, even though you're a Hamilton fan, let's be real. Ricciardo had it won. Had they not faltered in the pit stop.
I mean, Ricardo had it, but
Which he did.
Red Bull kind of screwed him.
With Red Bull.
And it wasn't even Ricardo's fault. They called him in, but they weren't ready.
So Red Bull already shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
But he would get his redemption, though. You fast forward 2 years later, in 2018, he would get his redemption. It was him, Vettel, and Hamilton on the podium with him in 2018. And he wouldn't win again until Monza 2021. A 1-2 finish for the team at that, considering Lando finished second, which Lando is overdue for a victory.
I mean, I think he got a little greedy, especially in Sochi.
2021.
Yeah, he had it. He should have actually came in
when it was slowing down, or when it started.
But the team was more like asking instead of telling them.
They did.
That was the problem.
But Lando declined. That was the problem.
Yeah.
And when you know it, veered off the road.
Yep, and look who passed him after Hamilton.
Sir Lewis Hamilton, and got that 100. He's currently sits at, if I'm not mistaken, 196 podiums in total.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Question is, when will he hit that 200? Where and when? Will it be 2024?
We'll have to discuss this during our predictions.
More than likely, on one of these days when we do a podcast, we'll have a friend of mine on, and y'all introduce yourselves and all that. Because she's also, this friend who I talk to on a day-to-day basis, also into F1. More so in the process of getting into F1, shall I say. All in all, though, was this podcast, the pilot, a fun one for you?
Yes. I think we hit some good pointers and, our opinions on certain things.
And controversial, hence the name of the title. Turn 4 sparks controversy, hence the title.
Yes.
Hence why I titled this in the first place. Titled that in the first place. Because I know, like we did moments ago, stuff like Abu Dhabi 2021, which I still can't believe will be 2 years tomorrow. Spain 2016, Adelaide 94, Jerez 97, etc. And of course, more controversial stuff down the line. But those are stories for another time, as this podcast has been going on for long enough as is. Other than that,
we can talk about, how about we talk about one controversy before 21 Abu Dhabi. How about 2008 Singapore.
Crashgate.
Yes.
The one that wait, you starting in F1 in 09. It was 1 year before you got into F1. I didn't even know
Yes.
F1 at the
So
time.
I didn't know about this. Like I wasn't into it, but you know, well now I I learned about this. But let's we can get into this, or we can talk a little more into it.
We can talk a little more into that now that you just mentioned that. Crashgate. For those that don't
Yes.
know, Singapore 2008. That was the first F1 race at night. Fernando Alonso won the race, but there was a bit of a twist. His teammate, Nelson Piquet, I'm sure it's etched into most of y'all F1 fans' minds. Nelson Piquet Jr., that is, again, Fernando Alonso's teammate, spun, the corner exit where he spun off. It's the same corner where he spun off. It's that corner that you go out and then you turn in to the left where the tunnel section is, where the grandstands is. You go underneath the grandstands. It's the turn before that. On corner exit, Nelson Piquet spun off and crashed. But here's the thing. Nelson Piquet Jr.'s crash was deliberate. In other words, it meant to happen.
I mean, there was also things happen during that. Not only that, but also, the incident with Massa in the pits with the
When he
fuel
had the
hose.
fuel rig problem, when the fuel nozzle got stuck on.
Well, also, I think that was the first time Ferrari had the lights for the drivers. I think that was the first time.
They did?
And yes, because before that, I think they had the lollipop.
When during the pit stop, where someone would hold a lollipop for the driver to stop, then they flip it to first gear, and then they raise the lollipop up. That's what
Yeah.
you're referring to.
Yes.
You're saying
Because
that race was the first time they had the lights system instead.
yes, yes, because I think I think they put the green by accident, but the fuel wasn't detached yet. But it wasn't Mazda's fault. He saw green, that means go, and the jacks were down.
So at that point, you go, especially when the light turns green.
Right. And of course, the teams practice this, not the fuel, but mostly just the pit stop minus the fuel.
The whole pit stop itself alone, basically.
Yes, yes, because the fuel that adds the total
weight to the car.
Pit stop. Usually that lasts, depending on the track, probably around like 12 seconds, 12, 14.
Do you know that one moment? Many people say cost Massa the championship.
Well, if people heard the news in recent that Massa is trying to now, I guess, appeal that. Now he had new information, I guess, from Bernie.
What I don't understand, why now, 15 years later, especially when Hamilton would have won it either way, since Hamilton finished inside the podium and Massa finished well down the order. Is it still going on with the appeal?
I'm not sure exactly, but I can say this. If Massa was to go forward with this, I don't think it will change anything. But I think this would.
It will, because like I said, Hamilton finished ahead of Massa in that race and inside the podium. Massa did not finish inside the podium and finished again behind Hamilton in that race.
But if Massa would try to appeal today, I don't know why. It wouldn't change anything. But that would probably give more reason to Mercedes to appeal Abu Dhabi because it's more relevant.
And it's
And
recent.
yes, but also the only reason why Mercedes didn't go forward because they had to go to the Court of Appeal. And that would take a little longer. But if Massa does go with this, most likely he'll probably get some money, but not really change results.
Because the results will be the same.
Yeah.
Again, it doesn't make any sense because why even when he appealed this years ago, it won't change anything since Hamilton would have won either way, given the circumstances.
And this would also impact like the other controversies. Of course, we talked already, 97.
94.
Well, not 97, 94. Even well before, there was a whole bunch of controversies that, well, I don't like to say it, but, of course, 1990, Japan.
Which that one was complete BS, in my humble opinion. After looking at the footage more and looking more in depth on what led to that, Ross is the champion in my book. Hear me out. You watch Aiden Millward on YouTube, yes? He went more in detail about it. I think it was last year when the Japanese Grand Prix weekend came around. He brought up the point where Senna said, and I quote, "This is really I was from the winter. I was from the year before. I was during when the pole position is on the wrong side of the track. And Alan Prost better not get ahead of me into the first corner, and he better not turn in because he's not going to make it." And Aiden even pointed out that in the telemetry, when the McLaren teams checked the telemetry, going into the first corner, in that moment, Senna hadn't even lifted.
Because, well, we talked to this before that Senna did not expect Prost to actually turn in. He thought he was going to let off since he was already pretty much on the outside. So he was probably going to lose grip or rear traction. And also, Senna was trying to prove a point to the FIA president.
On the pole position being on the wrong side.
Yes.
Which, did they change it the following year in 91? They moved it to the clean side?
I believe they did.
From 87 to 1990, it was on the dirty side, close to the pit wall.
Yes.
So it was moved to the clean side in 91.
Towards the grandstands.
Was it moved? So it was moved to the clean side in 91.
Yes.
So Senna did prove a point. Even so, my opinions on what happened in that race, after looking at the footage more and more and learning more about what happened, at first I'd said Senna won the championship either way. But now my opinion has changed with Prost winning the championship in the 1990 season. And I think, actually, no, not even think. Did you know Prost had a higher average finish than Senna in 1990?
I believe I did. I mean, they were pretty neck and neck, in that Ferrari. Because I think, Prost was, Senna was.
Senna was with McLaren still. And Prost jumped
they were Ferrari. The closest rivals in 90.
And in the end, it all turned on its head. Then 1991 happened, and Nigel Mansell was challenging Senna for the championship, and Prost was nowhere to be found, considering the problems the Ferrari had in 91. Prost dubbed it a truck, and that saying, when he dubbed that actually got him fired.
Well, I think the media kind of twist his words in a way that he didn't mean to say the Ferrari drove in a trot like it was slow. He was saying the ride, like the handling was rough. That's what he was trying to say. It drives like a truck. It was rough to handle, not as it's slow. But Ferrari, they're very critical and they'll think that he's talking about that they're slow.
Do you remember that one scene from Rush? Niki Lauda was testing the Ferrari car
Mm-hmm.
and said it was
Yeah,
box and it's terrible.
it drives like a pig, and they said you can't say
Say
that.
that.
He says
Why
why?
not?
It's a Ferrari.
It's
So,
That's
and
basically what that was in a nutshell.
and also no, and also quote after
2020, same
it's
thing.
well to this day it kind of holds true. You have all these facilities and you make a piece of crap like this. Uh, it's true with the amount of history. Uh, Ferrari is the oldest team in
On the grid.
F1 because they have been in F1 since it started.
1950, ever since it started. Now, I
Yes.
could be wrong when I say this, but do you know F1's very first race under the Formula One World Championship name? Silverstone 1950, in May of that year? Would you believe me if I told you that Ferrari did not take part in that race? The moment
Well,
of silence, please.
probably Ferrari wasn't interested at that time.
The Enzo Ferrari himself. Well, he would not too long after, and has been in the Formula One
Mm-hmm.
World Championship since 1950, 1951. And since then, and is today, the most winningest team on the grid with the most drivers' championships, most wins, most podiums, most poles. You could say that Ferrari is, needless to say, in a way, the face of Formula One. Not just Formula One, but production cars. You know, public cars that you see on the public roads and other forms of motorsport.
Yes.
Most recently, correct me if I'm wrong, but Ferrari recently won the 24 Hours of Le Mans this year.
Yes.
Okay, so they did. I don't follow IMSA as much. Do you?
Not that much, but I see the news here and there.
Looks like we're on the same. I rarely see the news since I'm more so on the F1 side of things and the NASCAR side of things and IndyCar as well. I think you told me that you're not into NASCAR as much.
No,
What about IndyCar?
not really. Only there was only the one time when Alonso was for the Indy 500.
He was in it twice, 2017
Yes.
and 2020.
Yes.
I think 2017, you compared to 2017 and 2020. I think 2017, I forget
Mm-hmm.
where he finished, but he finished higher than where he placed in 2020.
Well, 2017 he was out
Oh,
due to the Honda unreliability again.
I'm not surprised, considering he already had enough of those enough on the Formula One side of things. Which
Yes.
reminds me, do you remember that one quote he said in Japan, 2015? GP2 engine,
Oh my God.
GP2 screams on the radio. And what you just said as your reaction, you remember that very vividly. Didn't he say that in the
Yep.
very early stages of the 2015 Japanese Grand Prix too?
Yeah, and I believe he said that when I think Max passed him.
You can't be serious right now.
I'm not. Like it was that embarrassing. And we both know that Alonso puts his heart on his sleeve.
And puts his heart with the team that he drives for, or teams that he's driven for over the years. Specifically, McLaren, with the announcement that the McLaren Honda package was coming back for the 2015 season. Because you were getting your feet wet with F1 at the time. When did the announcement come out when McLaren and Honda were reunited? When did that come to be? Like, when did that first come out?
I believe it was supposed to be. I think it was. Well, it was. Yeah, it was. I think it was. No, I think that was during the 2014.
Which race though?
Oh, what with the GP2 engine comment?
That was Japan 2015. What I'm saying is, when did the announcement come out when Honda and McLaren were reunited? When did that? When was that first out?
Oh, ooh, that I can't really. Not I can't think of it on top of my head.
Because it was almost 10 years ago.
Yes.
You feel old yet?
No, time has passed, but at least McLaren has learned that it wasn't the Honda engines that were the problem
Oh, it wasn't.
because they had the same problems with Renault.
So it's not the engine supplier.
No, and they were bashing Honda, which ended the partnership.
Oh, how bad was it?
Even Zach Brown was talking bad on them.
Even Zach Brown.
Yes.
I know Fernando, for a fact, was talking him out on it with how bad the package was.
Yes.
Again, 2015, especially when he made that infamous comment in Japan in 2015. 2015 as a whole for McLaren was nothing but bad because didn't they finish second to last in the Constructors' Championship?
I believe so.
That's bad. Very bad.
It is.
Bad seasons Fernando Alonso and Jenson Button, 2015.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Now, 2016, slightly better, but it was still bad nonetheless. Because again, it's McLaren we're talking about here. It's not Marusco.
Yes.
It was Mana back then. It's not Mana. It's not Sauber. It's not Force India, I'm sure, were higher than McLaren that year. This was, again, folks, this is McLaren standards. A team that's won championships, drivers' championships, and with the McLaren Honda package, won the championship in 88, 89, 90, 91. You don't expect that.
And 2008.
In 08. But back then, 08, they were using Mercedes power. That's why I didn't say that.
True.
And that was the last time McLaren won the Drivers' Championship, too, courtesy of Lewis Hamilton at the time. That was the last time. And do you remember James Allen's comment when the race concluded? You will never see anything more dramatic than that in that sense.
Oh, yeah.
You fast forward over a decade later, Abu Dhabi 2021 said, yeah, hold my beer. But let me ask you this.
Pretty much.
Which is more controversial, though? Brazil 08 or Abu Dhabi 2021? That's definitely a hot take right
there. I would still say Abu Dhabi.
I can see why you say that. I can see why. It's because, again, the FIA manipulated the rules. 08, it came down to who was going to come out on top. Was it going to be Massa? Or was it going to be, well, technically, they both came out on top when you think about it, because Massa won the race and the championship.
Albeit
for 15 seconds. And then Hamilton made the move on Glock for fifth, crosses the line in fifth, wins the championship.
Even though Glock was on dry tires.
Yes. And Hamilton was on the intermediate tires. Or was it the wet? I'm pretty sure it was the intermediate tire compound that he was on.
It should have been intermediate. The track wasn't that wet.
Because it had to have been intermediate compounds then. It had to have been.
And, there's really nothing else Massa could do. He won the race.
And
He
the
all he had to
championship
do was
too,
wait.
again, but for 15 seconds.
Yeah, there was nothing else he can do except for
let's be
wait.
real, folks.
See the results.
Let's be real. Massa technically did win the championship. I just want that to sink in for a second. But only for 15 seconds, because we all seen the footage 1,000 times. And we all heard Martin Brundle and James Allen's commentary 1,000 times on that infamous moment.
And seeing Ferrari and Massa's dad celebrate too early.
Do you know why Red Bull didn't do that in 2010? They didn't want to make that same mistake Ferrari did.
No, they wanted to wait because there's others
that were in the running. You can tell because Sebastian's race engineer, Rocky, got on the radio and said, "Okay, Sebastian, good job. I need to wait until everyone crosses the line. I need to wait. But it's looking good. You just wait, sunshine. You just wait." Hamilton, P2. Button, P3. This few more cars coming out of 15 and 16. Rosberg, P4. Kubica, P5. Dubis, the Moister. I remember that quote so vividly. And Sebastian getting emotional on the radio. Christian Horner getting on, telling him he was the world champion. Yeah, those quotes are etched in my brain because I've seen the footage and listened to the radio 1,000 times at this point. And I'm sure you were watching it live when it happened.
Yes. And that's also etched in F1 history.
Yes, it is. Dave, I don't know if you noticed, but in NASCAR standards, since 2014, 4 drivers with this chase system that they had since 2014. You know how the NFL playoffs work with this bracket system? That's what NASCAR has going on since 2014 with the chase system, now known as the playoff system. Whoever makes it into the final 4 drivers in the last round, 4 drivers have a shot at the championship. 2010, as I'm sure you know, the 2010 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, 4 drivers had a chance at the championship. Do you remember who those are? Because I do.
Yes, I know Weber, surprisingly. Button.
You said surprisingly?
Yeah, well, I mean, Weber hasn't always been there, but he can be up there. But for the championship, it was surprising.
So you're saying it was a miracle in itself, some way, shape, or form he got there in that point.
Yes, well, this 2010 was my first full season of F1, so I was still learning all the drivers.
And you were still relatively new to the sport.
Yes.
And your first favorite driver, your first favorite driver was Hamilton, or was it Alonso?
Alongside with Hamilton, my favorite drivers, I still like Alonso and like Kimi.
Kimi Räikkönen. Well, Kimi was doing rallying in 2010.
Right. I didn't know Kimi till he came back.
In 2012.
Yes.
Well.
And of course, I knew him when I saw old footage of F1.
Of races from the archive. 2005, 2007, 2008, 2009. Yeah. That's how you got to know Kimi before he made his return in 2012.
Right.
Which, funny enough, he would win in his return in Abu Dhabi that year with his infamous, "Just leave me alone, I know what to do." Yes, 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 I do it all the time. You don't have to remind me every 10 seconds. 11 years later, that's still etched in history in F1. But back to the Abu Dhabi 2010 edition. You say it was Weber?
Mm-hmm.
The other three
Button.
at that time.
Yeah, Weber,
Mm-hmm.
brothers Vettel, Weber, Button, Hamilton, Alonso.
5 right there. Button was out of the championship hunt after Brazil. He didn't finish
Yes.
in a good enough spot to put him in contention in the last phase of the season. After what happened in Brazil, he didn't finish in a good enough spot to have a shot.
Mm-hmm.
But did you know
Right.
during Brazil race weekend, Button was held at gunpoint?
I believe I heard something about that.
Button was held at gunpoint during Brazil race weekend in 2010.
Didn't it happen similar to I think was it Leclerc?
Are you referring to when he got his watch stolen?
Yes.
Was he held at gunpoint, Leclerc was?
I'm not sure it was gunpoint, but it was I know it was something similar
But I know he got his watch
that you
stolen.
guys watched.
He won the
Yes,
clock last year. Sebastian Vettel had his scooter stolen. You remember
yes,
that? When Vettel had his scooter stolen
yes,
last year?
yes,
F1 and the whole world, for that matter, can be a dangerous, unpredictable place.
yes.
All I gotta say about those matters right there. But Abu Dhabi 2010, last phase of the season, who were you rooting for the most? If you
For
remember.
2010,
Yes.
I mean, I don't think I was expecting us like a single driver because I didn't know who was going to be on top
Because again, you
because it was the
knew
final race.
at the time.
Right.
You were basically, you didn't care who walked away with the championship then, I would presume.
Right.
In the end, Vettel won it. Now, had Alonso finished 5th or 4th, he would have clinched the title.
Yes.
Because he lost it by 4 points. That was the margin between him and Vettel. Did you know when Vettel won the championship in Abu Dhabi 2010, that was the first time ever that he led in the Formula One World Championship?
Yes.
Who would have thought that it would come at a clutch time? Who would have thought?
It's similar happened to Kimmy.
Are you talking about 2007?
Yes.
If you were on the clock a few years back, he would lead. I think he led in the championship in 05, but no, he didn't. I don't think he did. Yeah, I don't think he did. I mean, he would close the gap when he wins, and Alonso had a bad finish, or even had a good finish, he would close the gap. But when he had reliability problems, like it and did, the gap would increase. Alonso would increase his lead in the championship.
And of course, Alonso blames Petrov for denying his championship.
I remember because they had footage of that. Alonso gave hand gesture to Vitaly Petrov from holding him back for several laps at that. I remember Martin Brundle saying, "Get Leo, son."
Yeah, I mean that's racing. He did what he had to do.
And then you fast forward 2 years later, same thing happened. Again, Vettel, Alonso. Again, Vettel wins, Alonso loses out. But this time by 3 points. Again, 2012. Were you watching that one live?
Yes.
And that was the last time, would you believe it, Speed was broadcasting Formula One at the time.
I remember.
What time did the race start, if you remember? The 2012 Brazilian Grand Prix?
Ooh. I mean, I would have to look it up. I can't really remember.
I'm going to assume you're doing that right now, as far as looking it up is concerned.
Okay, for Eastern time, it was at noon.
Really?
Yes.
I thought it would be early as hell in the morning.
No, Brazil is usually.
So it was exactly at 12 noon was when it started.
Yes.
And you more than likely turned to the Speed Channel then at that time and watched the whole race from start to finish.
Yes.
And you probably saw live when Vettel on the opening lap spun.
Yep, when he got hit by Bruno Senna.
And Bruno was out on the spot, along with Sergio Perez.
Yes. It was actually amazing that Vettel managed to
keep going despite the fact
he had a massive hole.
Despite the fact he still managed to work his way up. Not to mention, he had radio problems.
Well, according to Red Bull and Adrian Newey, they saw the car. Adrian deemed it as still drivable. There was no reason for it to fire it.
And Sebastian proved that it was still drivable, considering he worked his way up to 6th place and won the championship. And that was the last race for Lewis Hamilton in McLaren colors.
Yes.
Nico Hulkenberg got the most laps. And I think he set the fastest lap, too. I got to check the results again. But what were you saying?
Before he moved to Mercedes.
Where he has been ever since. Which, again, from Audace, he posted a video on Lewis Hamilton's move to Mercedes not too long ago. And on the thumbnail, it said in text, career suicide. At that time, when the announcement was made in mid-2012, when it was announced that Lewis was going to go to Mercedes, what was going through your mind when you first saw that? Again, if you remember.
I had the same thought as Audace. I thought he was making a big mistake. Wrong move from McLaren.
So you're saying he should have stayed at McLaren?
At the time, yes.
Because of how competitive he was in McLaren, even in 2012, despite the mechanical problems.
Yes.
Did you know, despite all those mechanical problems, Hamilton won the most poles in 2012 with 7?
Yes.
So this comes back to what I said. The MP427 that year was the fastest car of the bunch. Matter of fact, it tied Red Bull with 7 wins that year. Sebastian won 5 times, Webber won 2 times in the Red Bull, RB8, McLaren standards. Lewis corresponded to both Jensen and Lewis's car numbers. Jensen won 3 times, Lewis won 4 times. But again, Lewis won the most poles out of everyone in the field in 2012. In a way, it was a good farewell tour in McLaren colors before jumping ship to the team where he sits today.
Yes.
Looking back at it now, it's a blessing in disguise that he's made the jump to Mercedes. Because from 2013 up to, I'd say, 2018, 2019, look what McLaren went through during that time span. 2013, no podiums, no wins, no pole positions, but they did get a fastest lap of Checo at the Malaysian Grand Prix. 2014, they got just one race where both McLaren drivers got on the podium, but you would think it would be just one when Kevin Magnussen, would you believe it, Kevin Magnussen, in his first race on the podium, I say that because he would then be promoted to 2nd, and that promoted Jensen Button, his teammate, from 4th to 3rd, because 2nd place, Daniel Ricciardo, was disqualified. Wasn't it because of a fuel infringement?
I'm not quite sure.
I'm pretty sure it was a fuel infringement, hence why Ricciardo got disqualified. Nico Rosberg, that is, won the race. The first race under today's Turbo V6 hybrid era, which, can you imagine this for a second? Because you got into F1 in 2010, so you got into it during the last legs of the V8 era. When they switched from the V8s to the V6. I've heard from many people that when that happened, it wasn't F1. Basically, what I'm saying is it wasn't the same. When Australia 2014 came about, what was going through your mind with the regulation changes?
Like everyone, I didn't like the changes, but once I understood like how all the components work, I got more intrigued and I was excited to see how the season plays out.
And how was the 2014 season overall in your book?
Unbelievable that Mercedes constructed a dominant machine.
AKA the Mercedes W05. Hamilton won the most races with 11. Nico won the most poles with 11. But Nico lost the championship, and Hamilton came out on top in Abu Dhabi, which that race, Abu Dhabi 2014, that one had double points. I've heard that the FIA and F1 had planned to have the double points system for 2015 and beyond. Was that true?
What was that?
I've heard that the F1 and the FIA had planned to have the double points system for 2015 and beyond. Was that true?
I heard that, but I don't think I don't think the I don't think the either the fans or teams didn't like that, so they didn't do that the following season.
Which do you think that was a good move or a bad move on their part?
I mean, it was an interesting move. I wouldn't say it was a bad move.
2015 Mercedes, 16 Mercedes, 17 Mercedes. Do you remember what I said that we've lost 1,600,000 fans in the F1 community this year because of Red Bull's dominance, most specifically Max Verstappen winning 10 in a row?
Yes.
I think those people failed to realize that this is nothing new for F1 standards, because a driver or a certain team or a certain driver that just wins every single time, it's nothing new. We're seeing it now with Red Bull. We've seen it with Mercedes. We've seen it with Red Bull in the early 2010s. Ferrari, Renault, 05 and 06. McLaren, Williams. So again, it's nothing new. It's been a thing for years. Ever since the beginning of the sport in the 50s. So it's been a thing for over 70 years. The team and engineer mechanics who built the best car wins, as I'm sure you know. Right. That's the way it's always been, always had been, and always will be.
And I think we should end on that note.
Agreed, considering it's 5 minutes to midnight.
Yes.
5 minutes to midnight. I've yet to eat dinner, too. So my stomach is needing for food right now. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right after we end this recording session. And it was fun. It was fun doing this with you, Dave.
Yes, this was fun.
And I'm looking forward to doing more of these in future and into next year.
Yes.
Throughout the 2024 season, and who knows, maybe even beyond that. That being said,
time will tell.
Like you've said just now, only time will tell. So until then, wherever you are in the world, this is Turn 4 Productions, signing off the mic, as always. And until next time and further notice, peace out, stay safe, and have a good one. Dave, if you have any your signature sign off, say it now.
See you next time.